Welcome to a brand new episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Witnish. Today we have a very special guest, Sammy Gordon, and I'm going to run through this resume because it's extremely impressive. I actually
Thank you, mate.
felt like I wasn't doing enough with my life when I was reading this little list here. Sammy is the director of Australian Property Scout, which is a buyer's agency that is dedicated to helping people buy the right investment property across Australia to ensure people reach their financial freedom goals. Sam bought his first property at the age of 19 and amassed a significant portfolio of over 40 properties, a feat I don't think too many will be able to lay claim to in their lifetime. He won Australian Investor of the Year in 2020. He's one of the most downloaded experts on property podcasts every year. Today, we're going to dive into Sam's mindset, what it takes to become a millionaire and build businesses, dominate the property game, but also on the content side, he's building up his business through a content strategy in large part, which is getting on podcasts and being a very in-demand guest on these shows. And we're lucky enough to be sitting in the seat. So welcome, Sammy.
Mate, great to be here, man. Thanks for having us.
Very welcome, mate. And I was jealous when I'm sitting here and you're telling me you're up on the Gold Coast, just lapping up the sunshine.
Yeah, mate, it's pretty good up here, mate. I love it. I'm originally a Sydney boy for 31 odd years. But yeah, for the last 18 months, I've been up here and it's been good, mate. It's been good.
Unbelievable, mate. And obviously, there's a lot going on across all the sectors we just touched on: property, business, the economies, doing some interesting things, rate rises. So I think this conversation is going to go in a bunch of different directions. But let's kick off with the first part, mate. How old are you?
Mate, I'm 33 now.
33 and over
33
40,
years old, yeah.
over 40 properties.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, yeah. It's. I think we're up to about at the moment about 42 properties. And I've got it's about 55, 56 in terms of overall actual rental properties kind of on them as well. So there's a lot of sort of dual locks and even tri-ocs on these sorts of things as well. So yeah, it's pretty extensive now.
Unbelievable. So at 19, you dip your toe in the water.
Yes.
What attracted you to the property game at such a young age and being in the position to actually, get into the market?
Yeah, mate, it was a funny one. Like very early on, I left school at 16, right? So I just gone into year 11. I was traveling. I was originally living in the Southern Highlands, and I was traveling from the Southern Highlands up to Sydney for school every day because I was up there for a sports eye. It was too hectic. It was too much when I went into HSC years of year 11. So
Yep.
within about a month, I binned it, mate, and walked away from school and started working. Man, so I was saving up for this. I was saving up money, right, when I was in my late teens, and I had it in my mind that I was going to be buying a car. Like I had mine. It was kind of the time that like Fast and Furious was out, and
Yeah.
and it was just that time where just like those Jap cars were all the rage, and I used to love it, man. And so I was saving up, wanting to buy a Supra, a Toyota Supra. And my old boy was a mechanic by trade. And like looking back after, he very strategically would come along to each of these inspections, be like, nah, there's this wrong with it, that wrong with it, this wrong. And then he just kept, I just got dejected because he kept turning away all these cars. And then he said to me, he goes, why don't you buy yourself a house? Like, why don't you go look at a house? And then I had always known that a lot of people built wealth through property, right? In Australia, I think most people, even growing up, your parents normally, they bought a property for 100 grand 30 years ago. It's worth $1 million now or more. And so I knew it was a wealth creation vehicle. And I always had it in the back of my mind. I wanted to be wealthy in the future. So I just kind of got bitten by the bug of trying to go out there and find something. And then yeah, man, that was kind of where the search started. I changed tack at 19 and started, instead of looking for cars, I started looking for houses, and then yeah, really went from there.
Unbelievable. So was your olds, were they in the property game, or they just had that foresight to point you in that direction? Because that's pretty sound advice when you're that young.
Yeah, yeah, it was good, man. No, they weren't really like they had their own. They had the farm. Like it was this real old rabbit farm down south of Sydney. It was 10 acres. Like it was nothing special. They had that, and then they had this old fibro shack, bloody beach house right down the south coast as well. That was all they really had, and they bought the farm in the 80s, and they bought the beach shack in the 90s, and that's all they had. And they kind of just really focused on trying to pay down debt rather than building a big portfolio. They didn't have any investment property at all. So I think they just wanted me to get my foot in the door because that's kind of the whole great Australian dream is getting your foot in the door and buying your first place. So that was just really the precursor behind it, I think.
Amazing. And you grew out in rabbit territory. That's got to be a different experience than being a city folk like a lot of the people that I grew up around.
Yeah, it was very different, man. It was kind of good because it got me out of like in high school, I wasn't going crazy partying like crazy because I lived so far away. So I had my fun there, but like it was kind of good because it was a hard work ethic sort of environment that I grew up in. All of us, my whole family, kind of really, you know, we all got on the tools and we're always working all the time because being a farm, like that's just what you do. So it was good. It kind of bred that like good strong work ethic in me quite young. So it was good, man. It was different. I had the nice balance of also going to school in Sydney as well, though. So it was a good balance with it. But even that in itself was a very different. It was a sports high, so again, it was a different mentality from other schools as well. So it was cool, man. I definitely looking back, it's like fondly on kind of I guess how it created me as well.
Unbelievable, mate. Sounds like a very healthy balance. And so you get into the property game at 19. When did you start accumulating those second, third properties? When did that start fitting into the picture?
Well, after I bought that one, I started reading a lot of property magazines. And when I started reading all the property magazines, I joke these days, it's kind of like I gave myself like a bachelor's in property because I just consumed so much content. And magazines were what was around back in the day, not like this is 12 years ago, not podcasts, right? So I really focused on reading as much as I could and gleaning as much info as I could. So it was 2 years later that I actually bought a block of dirt. And then over the next kind of 12 to 18 months of that, I developed it and made a nice healthy profit on it. But it wasn't until about another 2 years after that that I had enough cash that I could pull it out because I was also quite a low income earner, so I didn't have much. So I kept trying to like find these ways of, well, how do I make as much equity as I can on the deal? So like as much, you know, force value on these things. But then I realized because I was on a low income, I also needed as much cash flow as I could as well. So I really started my strategy kind of kept changing and formulating. And that's when I really realized that what I needed to do was get both. So was go buy in the right market that was going to grow. Was three then really buying in the right market, but then also buying and making equity on the way into a deal, like getting it at a discount, and then also having a really good cash flow on that deal. And when I started investing that way, that's when the portfolio exploded. So I started going, you know, if it was one every 2 years, then I was doing two a year, and then three, and then six, eight, 10 a year sort of thing. It just kind of snowballed and went crazy. And that's what I love about property is it takes a little bit of time to compound, but then when you get it right and it really takes off, that's when the snowball effect is crazy. That compounding effect can be immense.
Unbelievable. So you've got a strategy that obviously increases your capacity to acquire more properties. And
Yes.
obviously that's the business that you're in today,
Yeah.
helping people run that. So what an evolution. What's the mindset? Obviously you got to give up a little bit, I'd imagine, to get to where you are in your early 30s and to acquire that many properties. So what's your mindset that helps you make those decisions and be committed, and keep reinvesting and keep compounding and building your portfolio?
Yes. Yeah. Like what is it that kind of kept building me with
Yeah,
that? Sorry,
yeah. What was
is that
your
what I mean?
mentality? Yeah. So
Yeah.
what the mindset and that goes on to have that tunnel vision to be able to see the big picture and keep staying on that in your lane there.
Man, I think for me, I never made much money. I know I touched on that a little bit earlier, but like I was never a high income earner. So I kind of realized, and I went through a few transitions in life. Didn't make it in a few things that I was really trying to make it in. Like I was a soccer player. That's what I was going into Sydney for as a sports high. Half decent when I was younger. Didn't make it though, right? That was a dream. And then I had a few other sort of careers that I wanted to. Actually, I'll say one of them was special forces. I wanted to directly enlist into special
Wow.
forces. Like I always just wanted to push myself as hard as I could. But in the course of an attempted career at soccer, I'd had hip surgery, and the hip surgery ruled me out of special forces. So I kind of like I realized that it was like for me, it was property. I was all in on property because I was just like, this is now my wealth creation vehicle. The two careers that I, you know, if I failed one, I was going to go for the other. Both of those are now off the table. So I knew I needed to really push the envelope now with property, and that's when I just decided to go all in. And I think, you know, there's a saying, I think it's Schwarzenegger's saying from back in the day. It's like burn the boats. You know what I mean? Like you've got to really like go all in on something to get a great result. You can't half-ass something and do a little bit here, a little bit there. And you can have a crack at, you know, the side hustles and all the rest of it. And you can do okay, but like you have to go all in on something if you want an all in result, if you want the biggest results. And I think that's what kept me really focused and motivated on it. And then I just kind of pushed it as hard as I could. When I had equity to pull, I'd pull it. When I had borrowing capacity, I'd buy. And I just kind of just kept moving. And that compounding effect of, I think, really running it like that, is crazy, man. Like that's what's the most powerful thing that there is, the compounding effect when you pick it up and build steam. And when you're winning, like it's I think that the it's a I guess the positive effect of winning and the confidence that comes from that keeps your mind on the journey and makes you want to keep pushing with it as well. So yeah, man, it's been a crazy journey, but it's kind of snowboard, and there's always those doubtful moments where you think, have I stuffed this up, or am I doing the right thing? But it's all part of the journey, man. I don't think anyone that's been truly successful in anything hasn't had those doubtful moments and times as well.
Couldn't agree more. And let's go into that. So on the journey to get to any
Yeah.
level of success, I'm yet to meet the person that hasn't had those moments of doubt, those bottlenecks where they've made mistakes. So let's talk about some of them. What are some of the lessons or fork in the road moments that you've had to come across on your journey to where you are today?
Yeah, man. Some of the big ones has been getting stuck with serviceability. So for me, with borrowing, with investing, borrowing like finance is 50% of the game. So 50% is buying the right property, and 50% is knowing how to work finance properly. That was probably my biggest roadblock when I hit that, and kind of working and finessing how to get around that and being able to keep building the portfolio and moving forward. That was a huge win in learning how to do it, and it was a big learning curve of really running with that as well. Um, Man, probably the biggest, and this is actually, I look back now, was the best thing that ever happened to me. So I like obviously I run a buyers agency now as well, Australian Property Scout. I run the buyers agency, and man, like back when I was reading all my property mags, I was obsessed with all this stuff, and you'd read about these different people that were really, really successful investors, and they were buyers agents as well. And there was this one guy in particular that I kind of saw as my idol, and I went off and I tried to use him when I was 7 properties in, and I actually got burned.
Wow.
And at the time, man, it was bad. Like I lost 10 grand. I was like 26, I think I was. Like I was making 70 grand a year, so 10 grand of after tax dollars was huge. It killed me, man, it gutted me, right? But I think, and I look back now, and it was 100% the best thing that ever happened to me, because it made me super hungry. Like it fired me up and made me really angry, and made me want to really build the best portfolio I could. But then it also like channeled this sort of rage into wanting now overtake him as a buyer's agency, but with the right morals and like wanting to do the right things by people. So where I got burned by him, and all right, I got burned 10 grand, but he lost the full picture of what he could have done with me as a client. Like that's how I now look at our business and what we do, and it's looking after everyone. So it's kind of like it was honestly, it was almost like the best thing that's ever happened to me, because it put me on completely the right moral compass code for the way we run our stuff. And it also pushed me into doing it, because like I wanted to do that for that reason. So, man, it was a huge learning curve, but, and it was a really, like, it was a big lesson at the time. And it was one of those things too, mate, losing 10 grand as a 26-year-old. And to put in perspective, I lost 10 grand because I never bought anything because his deals were that bad. And it was a non-refundable fee. So I literally lost 10 grand for nothing. Like I got nothing for it. But it was just that really expensive learning curve. But it was probably the biggest life lesson, the best life lesson I got. So I
Isn't
thank him,
that
but I want to slap him, so I can't.
yeah, there's always I think that's the beauty of success. There's a sense of gratitude for those experiences that at the time are brutal, and they sting, but it's where the light comes. It's almost like you go to the darkness to see the light.
Yeah, man.
And everyone I've spoken to that's playing at a level that a lot of others are aspiring to, in their, I guess, darkest or hardest point in the journey, was actually where they found that turning point that's taken them to where they are today. So your journey parallels that
100%,
story.
man. 100%.
Awesome. And so obviously to get to over 40 properties, you got to learn a lot. So did you do it all through self-learning, or did you engage mentors and have people help you on your journey to get to where you are?
So when I hit about, I think I was at around about 25 odd properties through. I actually did engage a mentor just to work with. I've engaged different people, and I've done different courses over the years. And you always pick up different things from different courses. Funnily enough, I'm going to be releasing a course later this year, because there's just so much. There's so many things to glean, and like obviously, like I cover a lot of stuff on my own podcast now as well. Things that I just think are like real knowledge gaps and misses that people just don't understand that are out there, and that what can be done. And all these different people I worked with, none of them were like guns, and there was nothing that level. There was no one person that I worked with that was like, man, these guys have the answer to everything. Like this is unreal. but I always picked up a little bit here and there from everyone, whether they were the courses in the early days, the mentor that I worked with for 12 months when I was about 25 properties in. I learned one strategy off him, which made me a lot of money and it was good. And I've been able to implement that for clients as well. But like that was kind of all I learned from him, right? So, but it's kind of piecing all these different things together and learning all these different things as you go that were really, really powerful, I think, and really helped me, really helped me overall with the whole journey. So it's funny, yeah. It's like you say, it's mentors can be a really powerful thing as well. And so much of what I did learn was self-learning, but I was really slow in those self-learning times as well. Like I look at my portfolio now and like I did one property and then 2-3 years later, I had done another and then 2-3 years later, and then it started to build. But like I look at people's portfolios I build now, I've got guys in the same position that we're getting 3 properties in 18 months, and then they're still scaling and building off that. But like you look at the windows of what you can do with the right person you're working with, and the results can be wildly different. So, yeah, man, it was an interesting thing to reflect on.
Yeah, and I guess now we've got an interesting, like every state is going through a different experience with the property market, and obviously there's a lot less demand than there has been when we had low rates and
Yeah.
all these other variables and stimulus holding up spending in the economy. So let's talk about that. How's the last, let's call it 12 months?
Yeah.
How's that experience been for you, for clients, as a someone that's very heavily invested in the property space?
Mate, it's been awesome. It honestly has been awesome. So, obviously the 2 years before it were amazing. Like the market was crazy. It was pretty hard to get wrong during that period. But what you could really get wrong was the last 12 months and really like the last 18 months. Because if you bought in the wrong market 12 to 18 months ago, you were paying for it now, right? Because of the last 12 months we've just had. But where we were buying and what we kind of strategically shifted focus to probably that 18 to 24 months ago were different markets that we knew were going to benefit once the COVID boom ran out. And so, man, I've been so happy because all these markets slid back in the last 12 months. And it sounds bad, and I don't mean it in like a ha 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 sort of moment or anything. But like I look at these other markets and so many people and the media portrays it like the whole country's gone back. And a lot of the countries, your big cities and whatnot, have gone back, some of them 10, 20% in different areas. But man, like I love it because in the last 12 months, most of our investors are up 20, 25, 30% on properties they bought literally 12 months ago. And the guys that bought 18 to 24 months ago in these same markets are up significantly, even more than that. So it's like, it's one of those things, man, is it's like there's mainstream media and there's the headlines, but then there's like what you can actually do in these other markets as well. Because the country and the Australian property market, it isn't one market. There's so many markets within it. And that's what I actually love about it, because there's always somewhere worth investing in. There's always somewhere worth buying in. And I think that's when you understand that and then you understand how to play that game, there's so many opportunities and there's so much money to make within this property space.
Unbelievable. And is there any markets you want to divulge on this show, or are we keeping that sacred for behind the scenes?
I keep everything pretty close to the chest, man. I'm sorry.
That's all good. That's all good. It's probably asking for myself, but we can have that. We'll have that conversation.
We'll talk about that one off air.
Offline. Awesome, mate. And so let's talk about the transition. So you started amassing this incredible portfolio. Then through the experience you had with a buyer's agent, you sort of thought, wow, like someone could come in and do this ethically and give a great outcome for clients. So when did the business start? Let's talk about when that launched and that evolution.
Yeah, man. So the business it's a crazy story in my mind, man, because like the first year, so I started in 2019, like literally the very start of 2019, and the market was very flat during that time, and there was a lot of like big players. And I'm an investment buyers agency, right? So I don't target owner occupied homes, like people's primary residences. I don't target that stuff. It's purely investment. When you first come in, you're competing against a lot of people, and when the market is very flat, like it was, it's very hard to cut your way in. So my first 12 months. This is actually, I guess, a great point for I know what your audience really is about as well in terms of the content side. Man, like trying to get out there and do the word of mouth and trying to get myself in front of people, it was a mission because I had no social proofing and I had no like real runs on the board from a business perspective. So it was very hard. My first 12 months were really, really hard. It was probably about 3 months out at from the back end of 2019. I think it was around September, October. I started actually getting my story out there. I didn't really ever want to. I always kept it really close to my chest. Most of my mates didn't really, they knew I had a couple. They didn't realize how many I had. And I think at the time I was up to like, I don't know, 18, 19 properties, something like that. They thought I had a couple when I had this massive portfolio. And yeah, man, it was when I kind of got out there and actually started telling my story and actually like, I guess just being pretty raw and like honest with my journey and everything. I think that connected with a lot of people. And that's what really took us off. And then in January of 2020, I also won Strategic Investor, the Australian Property Investor of the Year. So kind of putting those two together, that's where it's just like there was the jet fuel on the fire sort of thing, and it just took off. So yeah, man, it was a pretty crazy year. And then so 2019 was very slow. 2020 picked up and started to take off. And then 21, 22, 23, we've been finalists for Buyer's Agent of the Year every year. We literally just got awarded this week again. So it's been a crazy, crazy journey, like Buyer's Agent and Buyer's Agency of the Year. So it's just been insane, man.
Congratulations, mate. And I think
Thank you.
that's really important, leaning into the content side. So when you do put the effort in, you get your story out there, that's when you get the attention. And that's when you do get in a position to get the accolades that you've picked up. Isn't that right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely, man. And the business as well. Like it's very hard not putting content and not putting yourself out there. And if I guess if it's one thing I can kind of say and help your audience with, man, there's one video I'll never take down on my Instagram, and it was like my very first. I do this thing. I got like a wise Wednesday, and I do like a twinkle finger, like wizard finger. I don't know, it was weird, man, but like I do that, and I'll never ever take down the first one I ever put up because it reminds me of like how nervous I was. You could barely hear me. I was so quiet, but it's like that. It's like that humbling reminder of like where I started from. And these days, man, like I don't care. I just say and do what I think, like how I honestly feel. But yeah, man, it's like that. I go back and I look at it, and I think it's funny because everyone starts awkward. Like it's very rare for anyone to start like, super confident. And it's all good, man. Like you just start and you roll with it, you'll get better at it and you'll get more confident. And I think that was that I just took me time. And then when I finally got there, now I actually enjoy doing it. So yeah, man, it's cool.
That's the cliff note for the listeners. Just get started because
That's
you'll
it.
get better and you want to build that muscle. And
100%.
do you have a team of 16? Is that
Yes.
right in the
Yes.
agency? So
Yep.
obviously that takes payroll. It takes, you got to create revenue to do that. So
Definitely.
obviously the business has accelerated since you started it. And I know to the content point that podcasting has been a great way to build your audience. So let's talk a little bit about how the business started to grow and then how you've utilized podcasting as a content strategy to, I guess, get in front of potential clients and build your target audience.
Yeah, definitely. Man, I feel like everyone's got a story, right? Everyone's got a story. It's just the way you tell that story is what really will portray and kind of take you to a different point. And I think you just got to get comfortable about talking about your story and kind of, if you're in a space that you're trying to dominate or whatever, and you're just trying to cut your way into, you got to tell your story, you be raw, and then it kind of gets people let their guards down a little because you've been raw and honest with them as well. And I think like from a podcast side, that's what I found was really effective for me. I didn't go out there and try and be someone that I wasn't, or portray or act like I was an expert in something that I wasn't an expert in. I just talked confidently about what I knew and what I had done successfully, and that's kind of really where it paid off, man. And like these days, mate, like we have our own podcast. I hope you don't mind me mentioning it on
What's
here,
the name?
the Scouting Australia podcast. Yes, Scouting Australia podcast.
Perfect.
Thank you, man.
Perfect.
And it's like when we jump on there. So I've got a co-host on there, Jimmy, and like we jump on there and we have a laugh for one, like we have a good time with it. But man, like the content within it is it's like very targeted in terms of what our strategy is, right? What our strategy is as a buyer's agency and what I've been really successful with. Man, we literally dissect that and we go through that and we run through people's portfolios that we've done it with. And I think just being like raw on that side with what we know works and what we know really, really well, that's what pays off, man. And so like that's the way I think it's really worked well for us. So I jumped on plenty of other property podcasts and platforms and everything for ages. And then I think creating our own, which was only late last year that we started ours, and then just sending our message on it as well. I think just being consistent with it is the most important thing. I think you probably know these stats. It's something like 95% of people do 5 potties. There's 5 potties in and then they're done because it hasn't exploded. And I think it's just like, it's all part of it, like it takes time to build and take off. So
I think you could draw parallels to your property journey. You start with that
Yes.
first one, it takes 2, 3 years to get number two, but then it goes boom, 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 boom. Content's the same. No one tunes in to the
That's
first few
it.
episodes, probably the
That's
first
it.
100, but then all of a sudden you start to get a little bit of attention and the word
Yeah.
gets out. So,
Yeah, man.
and what would you say to anyone that's sitting on the fence in that regard with a podcast? They've thought about it, they're umming and ahhing, they might lack that confidence or even that mentality. What would you say to someone that's sitting there at the moment?
Ooh, probably just get really clear on what you want to achieve out of it. Just be really clear. And probably not like probably be careful not to waffle too much about something that's like not important. If you're going to do something that's like a potty and like I probably work out the time frames of how long you want to run something for, but just be like giving really good value in how long you need to give that value. So probably be careful of that side of things. And then man, just deliver on the really good content and just go from there.
And I noticed that you picked your niche, and I think
Yes.
that's important too for building an audience. If you pick a niche, you will get, even though it's maybe less appealing generally, you can actually build the right audience, which I think is really important for having continuity listeners. And you've obviously done it with your show.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, man. No, I couldn't agree more with that. I think one of the other things too, Aaron, man, is like what I've always found, and some people see a niche in something in terms of like something that they know they can make money in, right? What I've always found is like you can kind of make money in anything if you really want, like if you really go hard enough at it. But I feel like if it's something you're passionate about, you're really passionate about something, you'll make more money than anything else. You know what I mean? And you'll do better than anything else. And it's your passion. You won't get tired. You won't be dead from it. There's some weeks, man, where I'll do like a 70, 80 hour week and I'm knackered at the end of it. But I love what I do. It's not like I get to the week and I'm like, I hate this thing. I don't want to do it anymore. It's just like, that was a week I had to do this week. I will try and take it a bit easier next week, but it's like, I love it. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's okay. If you're doing a 70 to 80 hour week and you hate it and you're doing it just because you make good money from it, it's going to be very hard to stick in there for the long term. And so on something like a potty, if it's something you're actually passionate about and you can draw out topic after topic after topic and just talk passionately about it or get someone on that you can talk passionately with about it, like I feel like that's where the magic happens and like that's where it really builds and grows from there. Yeah, that's my take on it, man.
I agree. Hit the nail on the head, mate. So we're on the same page. Hence why we're here on it's a Friday morning having this conversation.
That's it.
So that's awesome. So we'll pivot back into the business side of things, and thank you so much for
Yes.
sharing that. So are you willing to bit of value for people that might actually be interested in what you do? Because in my opinion, when there's these conditions show up, it's a good time to start taking advantage of the market. Are there, in terms of the strategic side, are there any, I guess, bullet points that you want to share with the listeners to consider if they want to explore that path in the next 6-12 months, and also they'll be able to get in contact with you at the end of the show. So is there anything that you want to give some hot buttons for them?
In terms of like what to look for in the market?
Yeah, so obviously your strategy is about investing in property. So there's a whole bunch of extra considerations. And if you're sort of buying a dream home, whatever that. So some of the things that you look for when you're working with clients to meet the criteria.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, man. So like when you're working with us, like we're always taking like strategy into consideration, like what can we do to really help build out someone's portfolio towards their goals and what they're actually trying to achieve. So everyone's goals will be different and everyone's starting point will be very different. So some people that'll come to you with 60 grand in the bank and they're making 60 grand a year. And then you get some people come to you making $500,000 and they got $1 million in the bank, like they're very, very different scenarios. But that person may want a portfolio 10 times the size of the guy on 60K. So there's so many different like strategies and whatnot within it. And I feel like, if that's something you want to explore, definitely get in touch because there's so many just different pathways to achieving it, right? And there's so many different property types. But the market right now, it's a really interesting time. It's like you said, and like we spoke about before, there's different markets in Australia that are still going to be coming back, and they're going to be feeling the pinch of higher interest rates over the next couple of years, or at least over the next year or two. There's going to be some serious mortgage stress. But then there's other areas that are very early in their cycles, and they're actually still extremely affordable for the incomes in those areas. And there's a lot of projects and population growth and all these sorts of things. So there's always places still worth investing in. And so I think that's the real key thing is like in a market like this, is just being super aware that we're not in a COVID boom everywhere. Again, where everything rose. There was a couple of years where everything rose, depending on the market, depended how much. We're in a very different market now, where there's maybe 5 or 10% of the country that's still worth investing in, and the rest you wouldn't touch with a 50-foot barge pole. So I think like understanding that, and then understanding what you need in your portfolio to actually keep building it. What are the properties? How much capital have you got? And then really working out a game plan around that and what we want to acquire. That's the most important thing to be able to, I guess, keep building and really get this thing, right and hit your goals.
And what's if someone's, let's say they're at the beginning, so entry level, what would be the minimum requirements to actually get their toe into the water with property investing?
Yeah, man, like the absolute minimum we like to work with, absolute minimum is 50K, purely because like 50 grand, it is a bit of a tighter deposit amount to start with, but 50 to 60 grand is still workable. 80 to 100 is plenty. But yeah, 50 to 60,000 with the being able to borrow, 300 grand, $300,000, which most people can do. That'll get you into like entry level and actually start building. Like you will be able to start building a portfolio with that amount. So the barrier to entry isn't as big as most people think. A lot of people think you need a couple of hundred, or you need to be making a couple of hundred, and it's not the case. You can definitely start with a lot less than that and still achieve a great result.
I think too many of those people live in Melbourne or Sydney. So.
Yeah, I had a lot of mates that were saying when I lived in Sydney, they just think you need all this money to do it, and it's crazy what you can do with a much smaller income than people realize.
Amazing, mate. And I'm assuming that you've probably got a nice spread in different locations across Australia. How long did it take you to start sort of diversifying outside your known areas, or did you start doing that straight away?
No, so like I was living in the Southern Highlands when I bought the one in Wollongong, so it's like literally half an hour from it. And then I bought the second one in the Southern Highlands. So my first 2 deals were pretty close to home. I was lucky because it was the right time to kind of be buying in Sydney, so it was okay. 2009, 2012, it was pretty well. Like the boom in Sydney started 2013, 2014, so I did pretty well timing wise of that. But then after that, and I'd made the money in Sydney, I took the money I first went into Adelaide in 2015, 2016. And then I went into Brisbane quite heavily, 2016, 2017, and kind of beyond that as well. And then what would have been 2020, 21, I went pretty heavily into Western Australia as well. So I've got a pretty diverse stretch and spread across the country, including regional markets within New South Wales, Queensland, and WA and South Australia as well. So like it's a good big spread with a good amount of different markets within it. I always like to find like different opportunities in different markets that you can really capitalize on and layer different strategies on. And when you can find those, you can do really, really well and win out of it as well.
Unbelievable. And do you have your portfolio pretty much under management with other parties, or do you get your hands involved sometimes with the tenants and that aspect, or it's all kind of white gloves at this point in the journey?
No, I mean, like I still do a little. Like it's funny, man. People think, oh, you've got over 50 rentals. Like surely you're pulling your hair out. You're on the phones nonstop, and it's not that bad. There's a strategy that I use called clustering, and so I will cluster houses in close proximity. So, like in New South Wales, I have 5 rentals, all within 15 minutes of each other. So I can have one property because there's one market I really honed in on and niched in on. And I've got one property manager managing 5 properties. They know what to bring to me, what not to bring to me. And then the same thing in South Australia. I've got 2 markets in particular I'm heavily invested in. Brisbane. Brisbane, I've got 2 markets. And then regionally, I've got another 2 markets. So I've kind of just got like, of the 55 odd rentals, mate, I might have 7 or 8 property managers across all of those rentals. So it's not that many. You're dealing with 7 or 8 people. They know what to bring you, what not to bring you. They're not going to muck you around because you've got a lot of properties with them. So if they stuff you around, you're going to be taking them elsewhere. But I think that's a really important thing, is having really good property management and just being really direct with what you expect from them. Not in like a harsh way, but in a direct way. So they know, they're dealing with someone that knows what they're doing. And that you expect a high level of service from someone that's essentially, that you're paying them for that. So, yeah, mate, I don't have too many issues at all. I keep on top of like rental renewals and stuff, just because I know the markets very, very well. But yeah, man, it's pretty good, man. Like it's not as bad as people think.
Yeah. Have you had any isolated incidences where something has gone really wrong with a tenant or with a property, been across a portfolio that size?
I've only ever had one issue with one person that moved out. Funnily enough, like I always used to like say touch wood, like I've never had any issues. But there was only one property I had an issue with, and they were just a bit grubby. I had a new build. It was a secondary dwelling that I built, and they just kind of like it was actually during the floods like last year in 22 at the start of 22. It was all the floods in Brizzy, and I wasn't anywhere near flooded areas, but because there was so much rain and it was so humid because it was in February, it was still summer. One of my properties had a bit of a mold issue. They moved out, took them to the court, got the bond back, got it all cleaned up. That's about that. It literally got it released within a week. That's my worst story of tenancy headaches. So that's literally my worst story.
That's fantastic,
So
mate.
I think it just shows like when you have yeah, man. I think it shows that when you have the right property managers, they can take care of a lot of the stuff for you. That's the only time I've ever had to claim a bond back. So
That's really, really good to hear. I mean, I know that you were across. We had Gary on episode 4 on the show. He's also amassed a significant portfolio, and same sort of thing. He's very minimal headaches. So I think a lot of people go all these tenants, and they might be looking at their own case study and projecting that onto. But I've yet to meet someone that's been very successful that says it hasn't been absolutely worth it, and clearly you don't keep going with something if it's not winning for you.
yeah, definitely, mate. There's always a couple of headaches here and there, mate.
Yeah,
Like there's nothing in the world you're gonna do that's you go out there and you're doing a job that you're getting 500 grand a year, which is pretty rare, right? Like you're gonna have some headaches. You run a business that's making 500 or a million or something like that, you're gonna have headaches. You run a portfolio that makes you a few hundred grand a year or $1 million a year in growth plus cash flow, you're gonna have some headaches. Like there's all these little things that come along with it, but like I know which out of all those I would choose because the most passive one is the investing side. You get a couple of calls a year, you got to deal with some shit. It is what it is, you know. People can sometimes take it like it's too hard or whatever. But realistically, mate, it's such a drop in the ocean of time to be having something performing for you significantly on the side.
yeah, and great
It's the
points.
ultimate side hustle, man. Honestly, it's the ultimate side hustle.
I
They
love
talk about
that.
making money while you sleep, mate. It can be insane.
Absolutely. I mean, just equity in itself, money while you sleep, it's literally equity growth is that. And borrowing that out is tax-free money as well, using debt. So
Yes,
there's so
yes.
many benefits. So, mate, we'll leave the audience with some of your top pieces of advice. Obviously, there's so many different applications you can speak to with your resume. There's business, there's building a brand, there's the property side. So if you had a couple of nuggets that have been really served you in achieving what you've achieved
Oh,
in your
on the
life
spot.
on the spot, if anything springs to mind, what is it that sort of intuitively pops up?
Mate, probably the biggest one for me is just to like probably exactly what we just spoke about then. So like push on. Don't let like little things deter you. Like always be pushing on. If you're committed and passionate about something, just keep having a crack at it, keep moving forward because eventually the needle will move, you know. So always keep like pushing on and don't let little things or anyone deter you. That's actually probably the biggest one. Don't let anyone deter you. Literally for everything I've done in my life, there's always been people around me saying, "Oh, I don't think you should do that. I think that's a bit too much. You're buying too much property. I don't think you should start your own business." Blah blah blah. Everything. I've been someone I got to the point where I just started holding everything close to my chest because there's always going to be naysayers around you. There's always going to be people like, and I get this with clients all the time that they get like two, three properties in, and their parents or their grandparents or their siblings or whatever friends are going, "Why are you buying so much? Like, what happens if this happens or that happens or you have vacancies and all the rest of it?" And it's just like, there's always people around you that will try and stop you doing things that are going to take you beyond them. And like the realistic thing in life, as sad as it sounds, is you are going to leave people behind and it's completely fine. Like if you're wanting to achieve great things, your whole circle is not going to come with you. It's just, it is what it is, man. It's all part of the journey. And the sooner you accept that, the harder you'll be, the stronger you'll be mentally on that side as well.
Yeah, fantastic advice. Now, I'm sure if someone's tuned in this far, they've been glued to the information that you've been sharing. So they're going to want to find a way to either follow you or even get in touch because I know you're very generous with strategy sessions through my conversation with Tom. So here's your what's the best way to, one, if you're interested in the business side, getting into the property investment game, what's the best way to get in touch and do that? And then obviously how to follow your podcast, your shows, and you
Thank
on
you, man.
socials.
I appreciate it, man. So look, from a business perspective, easiest way to get in touch with us is at the website. It says www.australianpropertyscout.com.au. We're on all the social handles as well at Australian Property Scout, and then obviously the podcast as well, which again, mate, appreciate me obviously being able to jump on yours. The podcast as well is the Scouting Australia podcast, and yeah, that's there's some great value in there. If you want to learn anything or much about property at all, especially if you want to hear like. A lot of people love hearing my journey in detail, which is something we actually started going into. I wasn't really going to do it. I thought, bugger it, I'm just going to go like properly in detail. We're 3 eps in on the portfolio side of things, and I think I'm up to 11 properties at the time or something. Just going into real niche detail of every deal and how it happened. So if anyone, wants to listen along and hear that, anything to do with property, listen to the podcast because there's a lot of gold in that.
Yeah, I think getting the full story is always very attractive. I had down here, I didn't know how deep we're going to go into, but we'll try to, I said we'd be zigzagging all over the place, but
it's good, man. I like it going everywhere. It's good.
But I think if you got to this point, you're going to be interested in following Sammy, and I think some of you will be interested in actually having a conversation about getting the property game, mate. So really, I want to say thank you for your time, because obviously based on business on the portfolios, you probably got properties to buy today. And
we definitely would.
So mate, very generous of you to jump on the show and then share. So if you're listening, you're not following the show and you're not following Sammy, please subscribe and leave a review if it's a good one. and we'll be back again with another episode of the Content Marketing Podcast very soon. Thanks for tuning in.